Okay, so today I'm discussing an article called The Spectre of Fascism Haunts Hatred of Kids: How Legitimate Grievances Are Twisted for Fascist Aims. And it's by Jessie Krahn, who wrote the article in November of 2023. Um, so it's going to be low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of problems with the article, and it's a short article, so this video won't be very long. You don't have to worry. Um, but I think it's important that we lay out some definitions. So she gets into eco-fascism, and eco-fascism is basically the belief that there should be authoritarian policy in the way of climate change mitigation. It's usually about a specific group of people. So policies should apply to black and brown people, immigrants, minorities, people in the developing world. They should not give birth in order to allocate resources to a privileged group of people, usually white. Um, Now, they're not antinatalists, they're selective pronatalists. So they believe that people should give birth, just that very specific groups of people should give birth, and not others. They also believe in taking away liberties from certain people in order to save the planet. So it's very authoritarian, it's very fascistic, thus ecofascism. And like I said, it's usually race-based. So they're not antinatalists. Some of them might be. Some of them might be antinatalists, but they're generally not antinatalists. And this is why. So I'll give a kind of partial definition of antinatalism that's kind of based on ecofascism. So, not based on ecofascism, but as it's relevant to ecofascism. So, for one, consent is very important in antinatalism. It's very important that people agree with antinatalism and agree not to give birth. It's not meant to force people or coerce people into stopping giving birth. Consent is key. And it's key for a lot of other areas in antinatalism as well, which I won't go into, but when it comes to birth, it's important that there be consent. The second thing about antinatalism is it believes that all birth is morally wrong. So it doesn't matter what race you are, what country you're from, if you're an immigrant or not, your skin color, it doesn't matter. All birth is wrong. And antinatalism gets into animal it gets into animal suffering as well, but for convenience sake, we won't get into that right now. But it believes that all birth is wrong, morally wrong. It doesn't believe in government coercion or legal ways of preventing birth. It believes in convincing people of the argument that birth is morally wrong. So yeah, consent. Now, Jessie Krahn, going back to the article, she says that eco-fascists are often antinatalist, viewing a climbing population as an ecosystemic nightmare and generally holding that less people will solve the climate crisis. This position ought to always be viewed with suspicion because it conveniently does not account for the wealthiest 10% of people in the world producing a whopping 50% of all the emissions worldwide, according to a 2015 Oxfam report. So again, she's making a distinction between classes and wealth and possibly country of origin. Antinatalism doesn't care about any of that, and it also doesn't focus on. I mean, there is something called eco-antinatalism, which kind of distorts antinatalism, but climate change is just one part of antinatalist discourse. It's not the whole thing. And ecofascism is based on climate change. So there's a distortion happening there where it makes it look like antinatalists care about who produces more pollution and who's guilty and who's not. Antinatalism doesn't care. It's looking at birth in a general sense. Birth itself, no matter how wealthy you are, how poor you are, is morally wrong. It doesn't care about your race or where you're living or anything like that. And then she goes on to say, well, earlier in the article, she says, take the airwax-infused philosopher David Benatar, who argues by creating a person, you are introducing them to suffering that they wouldn't have experienced in non-existence. Now that's true, but she's insulting him. She's saying airwax-infused, but she's not saying why his argument is wrong. It's a short article, so I'm not expecting her to explain it, but I mean, you'd think after insulting him, she would explain a little bit about why that's wrong. I mean, even she says that even I've parroted the truism that I would never bring a person into this terrible world. I mean, that's getting awfully anti-natalist, but she thinks that Benatar is a jumping off point into eco-fascism, which is like we've discussed is not the same thing. And one interesting thing I noticed about the article, and this is just to show you how distorted she is in her writing. You know, she's written other stuff too that I haven't read, but I mean, just this article is just, she brings up this intersectional thing, and as if intersectionality isn't kind of distorted on its own, this is a further distortion of intersectionality, right? So she says that women and queer folks especially favor this brand of humor, miming projectile vomiting when kids are mentioned in conversation. No one can really be blamed for these reactions. Women are so often expected to want kids as if they have no interiority unspooled from motherhood. Women who say they do not want children are sometimes accused of being selfish in a feat of logical acrobatics. So that's fine. So women and queer people make fun of kids. They projectile vomit and all that stuff. Or they mime projectile vomiting when they hear about kids. So, and later in the article, she says, the other problem is that any belief that humans should stop having kids is disproportionately going to impact racialized communities. Most places flagged as overpopulated tend to have black and brown populations. The fact that most kids are going to be racialized means that vocalizing a hatred for kids is racist in the same way that saying nurses should be paid less is misogynistic. Inadvertently, the statement applies to specific people. So if you heard, you know, going back to her earlier statement, if somebody mentioned black people, for instance, and you mimed projectile vomiting, that would be racist. That would be explicitly racist. But for some reason, women and queer folks, it's okay to hate kids, when other people, if they hate kids, they're racist. Like that is just an utter distortion, or a further distortion of intersectionality, and it just does not make sense. She also says earlier in the article, some of my best friends are children, but even I can't always handle the disarray they leave in their wake. If you said you couldn't handle the disarray that black people leave in their wake, that would be racist. Like she's being racist by her own definition, by her own intersectional definition. So, I mean, that doesn't really relate to anti-natalism, but it's just to show you how weird the article is. Like, it's just really, she would have been 27 or 28 when she wrote this article. So she's not really like, you know, an undergraduate student. Like, she's a graduate student. And like, it's just weird how distorted the concepts are in this article. And I think it's important to explore it because this is what anti-natalists face all the time. Just this distortion of what they're saying, right? I'm dealing with somebody on my YouTube channel right now too that it just doesn't get it, like just does not get it. But they absolutely believe that they have something, right? But it's weird how people they just distort everything. So there's other contradictions as well. Like in the article, there's this tension between a world that wants kids and a world that doesn't want kids. So she kind of bounces those two things off of each other, but it doesn't fully resolve itself. But yeah, that's the article. It's a short article. It's low-hanging fruit, but I felt a need to basically like use it as an example of just the distortion of concepts. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. Bye.